How does a brand new airplane carrying 242 people crash into a nearby hostel just 32 seconds after taking off? On June 12, 2025, Air India Flight 171, a Boeing 7878 Dreamliner, took off from Ahmedabad, India, and was headed for London. It crashed into a medical college hostel, killing 260 people. The wreckage smouldered, the black box whispered strange secrets, and the world was left with a mystery as scary as the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Was it a mechanical failure, a pilot's deadly mistake, or something planned that was hidden in the dark? The story of Air India Flight 171 is scary and heartbreaking, and today we are going to search for the truth. We will try to discover and connect the story that could finally solve one of aviation's biggest mysteries. On that hot afternoon, the sun shone down on Ahmedabad, Gujarat's busy commercial centre. People were busy at Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport. Families were getting back together, business people were looking for deals, and students were dreaming of new places to go. A shiny Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner with the registration number VTANP was ready to leave Gate 7 of Terminal 1 for its 6,500-kilometre flight to London Heathrow. The plane, with its carbon fibre fuselage and fuel-efficient Gen X engines, was a sign of Air India's comeback under Tata Group ownership. Air India's strict rules said that the cabin had to hold 49 metric tons of fuel, which was enough for the 9-hour flight plus 45 minutes of reserve time. There were 242 people inside getting ready for the trip. 169 Indians, 53 Britons, 7 Portuguese, 1 Canadian, and 12 crew members. Passengers got comfortable in their seats. Some looked at the tarmac shimmering in the 38°C heat, while others browsed through the in-flight entertainment. Some of them were a young couple going to London for their honeymoon, a group of medical students going back to school abroad, and a British diplomat on an important mission. The cabin was full of excitement, and the air was thick with the promise of new beginnings. No one could have predicted the terrible things that were about to happen. 2 pilots in the cockpit got ready to fly this steel bird across continents. Captain Vikram Mehra, 48, was a very important person in Indian aviation. He joined Air India in 2005 and has since flown over 15,000 hours. Before that, he was a pilot in the Indian Air Force and flew Sukhoi jets on dangerous missions. People at work called him the Rock because he never lost his cool, even when he was landing a plane in a monsoon storm. He was a mentor, a flight instructor who had taught dozens of pilots how to fly the 787, and an aviation nerd who spent weekends working on model planes. But there were signs of trouble underneath his happy face. Leaked emails later showed that he had a bitter fight with Air India's management over long hours and unpaid bonuses. He was also going through a divorce that had left him financially and emotionally drained. To his right was First Officer Priya Sharma, 32, a prodigy whose quick rise through Air India's ranks had people talking. She had flown regional jets before switching to the 787 6 months ago after graduating from the National Flying Training Institute. This was her last evaluation flight, the last thing she had to do to get a full 787 certification. Instructor said Sharma was sharp as a razor, and she was very careful, following her checklist to the letter. She dreamed of one day being the captain of her own 787. As she adjusted her headset and looked at the cockpit's glass displays, that goal seemed possible. 1:25. At Indian Standard Time, the jet bridge pulled back, shutting the Dreamliner off from the outside world. Captain Mehra pushed the throttles to steer the plane down the taxiway to runway 23. The tower's voice crackled through. Air India 171, cleared to line up and wait. Runway 23. Sharma replied, her voice clear. Line up and wait. 23. Runway 23. Air India 171. The cabin crew locked the galleys, the safety briefing played, and the passengers fastened their seatbelts, not knowing they were about to step into the abyss. At 1:38:07 p.m, the tower gave Flight 171 the go-ahead to take off, Mehra pushed the throttles all the way down to the takeoff thrust, and the Genix engines roared as the 787 sped up. The runway below became blurry, and at 62 seconds, Sharma yelled V1 and then rotate. The nose rose at 155 knots, and the plane rose into the hazy sky, its landing gear retracting with a thud. For 30 seconds, everything was great. The plane went up 2,000 feet per minute and reached 180 knots. The city of Ahmedabad shrank into a patchwork of rooftops and roads. The cockpit was a symphony of accuracy, with screens glowing, systems humming, and the pilots all working together. At 1:38:42 p.m, just 3 seconds after takeoff, the unimaginable happened. The switches for controlling the fuel for each engine broke, 1 second apart, from run to cut-off. The engines ran out of fuel, and their roar turned into a sickening whine. The cockpit's electronic flight instrument system lit up with warnings, ENG-1 fail and ENG-2 fail. The plane, which was now a 200-ton glider, started to lose power. Sharma was still in the galley checking a cabin alert at Mehra's request when the plane suddenly tilted. When the cabin tilted, passengers gasped as oxygen masks fell from the overhead compartments. Mehra turned off the alarms in the cockpit. His face was blank as the plane climbed to 1,200 feet and began its deadly descent. At 1:39 p.m, only 32 seconds after takeoff, Flight 171 crashed into the BJ hostel block, 1.7 kilometers from the end of the runway to Medical College. The impact was catastrophic. A fireball erupted, engulfing the plane and the 4-story building in a storm of fire and debris. The fuselage of the 787 broke apart, its wings fell off, and the hostel fell down because of the force. There were 242 people on board, but only one passenger, 29-year-old engineer Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, survived. He was pulled from the wreckage with burns covering 60% of his body. There were 19 other deaths on the ground, including medical students, doctors, and staff who were caught in the fire. There was twisted metal, burning books, and the sound of sirens in the air. It looked like the end of the world. What could have caused such a disaster? On July 8, 2025, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, AAIB in India, released a preliminary report that dropped a bombshell. Someone had manually moved the fuel control switches to cut off. There was nothing wrong with the machine. It was a person who did it. To solve this mystery, we need to go back into the cockpit and imagine a situation that is both scary and possible, based on the carefully planned dark details of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370's supposed death. Captain Mehra's mind was racing as the 787 taxied, even though he looked calm. Later, investigators found out some troubling things. Mehra had been fighting his own demons. His divorce had taken all of his savings, and Tata Group's cost-cutting measures at Air India had cut his bonuses, so he had to work 80-hour weeks. A leaked email to a co-worker showed how angry he was. They treat us like machines, not pilots. Even more troubling, his home computer had deleted files from a Microsoft Flight Simulator session that took place on May 15th, 2025. The simulation was very similar to the path of Flight 171, with a 787 taking off from Ahmedabad, fuel switches cutting off at 180 knots, and a crash 1.5 kilometers from the runway, very close to the medical college. Mehra turned to Sharma at 1:38:39 p.m, just as the plane took off. "Priya, look at the intercom to see if the cabin is alert," he said in a casual but firm voice. "Make sure the crew is ready to climb." Sharma unbuckled her seatbelt and went into the galley, trusting her captain. She closed the cockpit door behind her. The reinforced door, which was built to keep hijackers out after 9/11, became Mehra's fortress. He reached for the overhead panel by himself, and his fingers found the fuel control switches. He quickly turned them to cut off in 2 quick moves. The engines sputtered and alarms went off in the cockpit, but Mehra stayed calm and turned them off with ease. Sharma felt the plane shake outside. She took a portable oxygen bottle from the galley because she thought the engine might have failed or the cabin might have lost pressure. She ran back to the cockpit and typed in the code on the keypad. The light stayed red. She tried again, her heart racing, and then she typed in the emergency code, which was supposed to unlock the door after 30 seconds if the pilots were unable to do so. Inside, Mehra's screen showed the words, "Cabin call." He turned the door switch to Deenwai, which locked her out. Sharma hit the door with her oxygen bottle over her shoulder and yelled, "Vikram, open the door!" "We're losing electricity," but the door stayed shut. Its steel was bulletproof and couldn't be broken. There was a lot of panic in the cabin. Passengers woke up when the plane suddenly pitched. Oxygen masks hung like lifelines, but a lot of people had trouble putting them on. "Put on your masks," yelled the flight attendants who were strapped into their jump seats. "Don't panic." The cabin got colder and the air got thinner as the plane went down. A young mother held her toddler tightly. A businessman held onto his armrest, and the medical students looked at each other in fear. The screens for in-flight entertainment flickered and then went dark, cutting off the last connection to normalcy. Sharma, who was in the kitchen, switched to a portable oxygen bottle that could last for 44 minutes and was made for crew members to move around in case of an emergency. She knew what to do. If the engines failed, she should descend to 10,000 feet, restart them, and fly to the nearest airport. The plane wasn't going down. It was falling. She used the satellite phone at the crew station to try to get in touch with Air India's operations centre. The line was dead and the SATCOM was off, probably because Mehra had turned it off to stop all communication. Sharma's mind raced. Was this a hijacking? A problem with the machine? Or something much worse? Mehra looked at the instruments in the cockpit, and his plan was coming together with frightening accuracy. The 787 systems were meant to warn pilots of mistakes, but he had already thought of everyone. The fuel cutoff wasn't an accident, it was planned. He had practiced this moment for weeks, both in his simulator and in his head. The place where the crash happened, BJ. It wasn't random that medical college was there. Because it was so close to the runway, it had the most effect on a world he thought had let him down. The cockpit voice recorder recorded his last words, which were very clear. This is it. There was no plea for help or explanation, just a terrifying acceptance of the end. Flight 171 hit the hostel at 1:39 p.m. with the force of a missile. The crash destroyed the front fuselage, the wings broke off, and 49 tons of fuel caught fire. The fireball destroyed the building, and the heat made the concrete break. Emergency workers got there in a few minutes and fought the flames to look for people who were still alive. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, who was sitting in row 32, was thrown clear by some miracle. His body was burned, but he was still alive. 19 other people, including students studying for tests and doctors making rounds, died in the fire. The wreckage was a twisted graveyard with seats and suitcases strewn about, among medical books and broken glass. The AAIB's first report, which came out a month later, shocked the world. The manual cut-off on the fuel switches ruled out a mechanical failure. The Indian Commercial Pilots Association said that investigators were using Mehra as a scapegoat without any proof. Their statement said, "No pilot would do this." But Sean Pruchnicki, an accident investigator in the US, told the BBC, "The switches don't move on their own. This was done on purpose, and the question is why." The black box, which was found in the wreckage, gave some answers. The flight data recorder confirmed the cutoff at 1:38:42 p.m. And the cockpit voice recorder recorded Mehra's last words. But the last 10 seconds were hard to understand, maybe because of damage from the crash or tampering. There were a lot of theories. It was unlikely that there was a mechanical problem because the 787's fuel system had extra safety features and no other similar problems had happened before. They thought about an electrical fire in the tail, but the engine stopped before the crash, not after. There were rumours of a terrorist hijacking, but no one took credit for it, and the cockpit door's security made it unlikely that someone would break in. The theory that made the most sense, but was also the most scary, pointed to Mehra. Cyber forensic experts found his simulator files, which showed a scary practice flight, a 787 taking off from Ahmedabad, cutting off fuel at 180 knots and crashing near the medical college. The simulation took place on May 15th, 2025, which was 3 weeks before the flight. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation ordered inspections of fuel systems for all operators, and Air India grounded its 787 fleet. There were no problems found. Tata Group promised 10 million rupees to each victim, but the families wanted the truth instead of money. In London, people mourned the 53 Britons who died. In Beijing, the families of Chinese victims protested, their grief echoing that of MH370's families. "We need the black box data," they chanted this outside the Indian embassy. In Ahmedabad, the medical college became a memorial site, with flowers and candles piling up in the rubble. The full AAIB report, which is due in 2026, may make it clearer if Mehra acted alone, or if systemic problems like overworked pilots and poor oversight were to blame. Captain Sanjay Ranganathan, a retired Air India pilot, talked about past cases like EgyptAir 990 and SilkAir 185, where it was thought that the pilot had killed himself. He told NDTV, "Stress can break even the strongest." Sylvia Spruck-Wrigley, who wrote Without a Trace, said that MH370 led to improvements like longer black box beacons. However, Flight 171 showed that the human factor is aviation's weak point. What made Mehra do what he did? His money problems and fights with management make it seem like he was at the end of his rope, but no manifesto came out. Was it really true that he turned off the black box's last moments, like in MH370? The pieces of the wreckage don't give can have a lot clues. They're too burned to prove sabotage. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, the only person who lived, remembers only chaos. "I saw flames, then nothing. The black box, which is still being looked at, might have corrupted data, which makes it hard for investigators to put together a puzzle with missing pieces. So the Indian Ocean is so big that it swallowed the wreckage of MH370, but the debris from the 787 is easy to see and is spread out across Ahmedabad's medical college. But the truth is still hard to find. Was Mehra a villain, a victim of circumstance, or both? Could aviation's safety measures, cockpit locks, strict training and psychological tests fail again? The industry, which was hurt by MH370, has to face a new reality. For the families of the 260 people who died, closure is a long way off. Their grief is made worse by the fact that they still have questions. This documentary is for them, for Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, and for a world that is still looking for the truth about Air India Flight 171.